The recent Tarkov TV has brought a ton of interesting information, with Nikita spilling the details on new features and changes and the next wipe for patch 0.15 in early August. Today we'll be looking at the 8 most interesting elements that I'm looking forward to that we should expect hopefully by the end of the year. If you're wanting to see a full recap of Tarkov TV in its entirety, then do go and watch one of the other videos like Pestely's, Jesse's or Nice Guys to get the full rundown. But we're going to jump right in with the armor system update. This is one of the biggest gripes for players at the moment because the armor system, while relatively realistic, doesn't feel that great for gameplay purposes. The main reason for this is that despite the armor system itself being quite realistic, the hitboxes of our PMC aren't. Compared to a game like Grey Zone Warfare, where you don't actually have health, you only have organs and blood, an armor system with plates makes more sense because if you get shot in the side of the chest, it doesn't necessarily kill you straight away. The bullet either doesn't go through a critical organ at all if it scrapes along the edge, allowing you to heal yourself, or it hits an organ like your lung or your heart in the center, but this area is better protected. This makes having a plate system more sensible in this type of game because you're actually protecting the thing that you would be in real life. In Tarkov, of course, any shot to the thorax of any kind is absolutely lethal in the sense that once the HP pool goes down to 0 from 85, well then you die. What this has led to is simply players just not engaging with the system. Most people that I run into use armors in their basic configuration and just buy one that's adequately set up on the traders like a Bagari rig or a Karund. There are a handful of other players that do like to optimize their plates like me, but these people also tend to stick to the same armors over and over again, and there isn't really that much that differentiates one from the other. Even elements like the throat protection that seemed important when the armor system came in obviously starts to become much less important once everyone has access to ammo like M855 that will just kill you through the throat armor anyway, so what's the point? On this basis, Nikita has said that they will simplify the armor system to make it more understandable and also to buff armor in general. Side plates, front plates and rear armor plates will now have identical colliders regardless of the type of plate, so it won't matter whether you're using a Western style or an Eastern style, those plates will protect you the same on those hitboxes. The colliders themselves, which is basically how the game determines whether a shot lands on the armor or not, is going to be increased significantly in size, and the example that he gave was that the front plate will now protect part of the collarbone, so further up on the thorax, and partially protect the armpit hitbox as well. So what we can take from this is that the armors in the game are going to be buffed in general, which might make it feel more impactful to wear the different pieces, and players hopefully won't feel like it's pointless to put on the best equipment. I personally would say that armors like the Zabralo, the Reduc T5, the Thor, and maybe even the Gen 4 Full could probably do with some buff to their soft armor up to class 4, even if it isn't realistic. Because right now, the negative penalties on the base frames mean that they're just never seen. All that you get is maybe 1 or 2 extra hitboxes at class 3 on the soft armor sections, and it is nowhere near good enough to take something like minus 10% move speed as a trade-off. This is not really a realism question, but more of a game balance question. So the second thing that I'm looking forward to the most is keeping the flea market open without find-and-raid requirements to list items on the market. Nikita basically said that the flea market experiment was successful and we're still going to be able to list items there without having a find-and-raid status on the items. This to me makes the flea market feel way more flexible and more fun than it is with find and raid, and this comes with some benefits to PvP too, with players finding high tier loot such as coloured keycards for example. I just found my first blue in the boss event, and because I could still sell it from my container rather than scuttling out of the raid, I went to go and fight somebody else because I still had 5 million sat in my back pocket regardless. Now, this change isn't entirely free from problems, and I did a big video on this subject which you can look at for more information, but the two main things are players being able to flip items from the traders back onto the flea market, and another one being hatchlings. For the time being, I think that regarding hatchlings, we should just see what happens, but the flipping thing I do believe will be detrimental to the early game, both in terms of being able to access those mid-tier items and also giving those players who are higher in level a massive boost in income. I've thought about this a lot, and there are two easy ways to solve it in my opinion. The first one being implementing my full not for resale system, where only players outside of your party can remove the flag by exiting the raid with the not for resale gear. This prevents insurance resales and teammates from flipping items by swapping kits at the end of a raid. I like this idea the most, but something even more simple that could work is simply removing the not for resale flag when entering into a raid. Yes, this would mean that you could then cheese it by going into a raid and then exiting immediately and selling the stuff on the flea market, but you still have to queue, wait for the game to start, risk something potentially if you get a bad spawn, and then leave and then list everything on the flea. With the advent of personal limits for basically every item and flea market restrictions on the high-end stuff, this might be enough to prevent the destruction of the early game, and it would be even easier to implement. Either way, I welcome the flea market change a lot, and I think it'll be good for the game in the long run. The third feature that I'm looking forward to is the Mannequins System, which appears to be some kind of room in the hideout where you can dress the mannequins with a full loadout from your PMC. From the screenshots and the videos that we've seen so far, this interacts with the preset system and will allow you to exchange an entire kit from your player onto the mannequin and vice versa. So you should be able to go in there and set up all of the same kit or a few different kits depending on the maps that you want to play. For example, if you've been sniping on woods and then you suddenly decide that you want to play factory, if you didn't die, then you still have your woods kit on your PMC. You'll be able to go into your mannequin and swap your woods kit onto your factory kit and retain it for playing that map again in the future, but be able to jump into factory nice and quickly without having to take everything off and put everything back on again. I strongly welcome this type of quality of life improvement because it will help us get into raids faster and organize our equipment better, which, as I've said many times, is one of the places where Tarkov falls down the most, so to see development in this area is very, very good. On to number 4, which is the multiple weapon features that are coming to the game supposedly in 0.15, the first of which is bipods and mounting. We will be able to use the bipods on the various guns now, as well as use walls and cover to be able to support our weapon to decrease recoil. This looks like a pretty cool mechanic, but it will depend on how it's implemented as to whether it's OP or just never used, and it might need some balancing. A few other elements that are being added as well is being able to choose what grenade to throw by holding down the G button. As far as I understood, this previously had been ruled out for a very long time, even when people had asked Nikita directly. So the fact that they've listened to this now is a really good sign. Grenades were already nerfed a lot in the past to prevent carpet bombing by 2 or 3 people, because the 2-stage process that exists currently makes it a lot more difficult to get a grenade off, especially as a solo player. Having the grenades pull randomly out of your rig when you press G as well, and not giving you any choice on which one to use outside of specific hotkey designations for an individual grenade was probably one step too far, so pulling this back is a really good idea. It also sounds like we'll be able to pick the tactical device mode using a similar system. You'll hold down T and then scroll to the one that you want and pick it that way, rather than having to flick through every single mode one by one. This is a feature that I hadn't really thought about, but it would be good to have. The last one in this section is smooth scope zooming, which I don't believe is coming in 0.15, but planned to come by October instead. Nikita did say that it may well be in the game earlier, but presumably this means that we will be able to pick a zoom level between 1 and 6 for the Voodoo, for example, and we won't be locked to the fixed zoom levels that are available in the game at the moment. This could be interesting to open out some of the other optics that are just not usable at the minute, because they have an extremely high and fixed magnification. Number 5 is again one that's not coming in 0.15, but Nikita has said they are working on it, which is the ability to do stuff while we are loading into raids, so using the stash, buying and selling from the traders, and using the flea market. People have been asking for this for ages, and it would be an amazing addition to the game. I can't overstate how much this will change things, and especially with the introduction of mannequins as well, imagine being able to set up your next kit while you load into the current one. Absolute game changer. So in number 6, I'm going to include PvE here, simply because I know a lot of people are interested in the PvE mode and many are playing it at the moment. The biggest update to this is that if you're playing PvE on your own without any teammates, you'll be able to play this on your local PC soon. They are currently working on changing the infrastructure of PvE to do such a thing and to save it locally so that you won't have to load into BSG's servers. This should shorten the waiting time to literally however long it takes your PC to load the map. Some people that I've spoken to in my community are skeptical about whether this will actually come to the game, but I definitely think that it will because they have a direct financial incentive to do so. Nikita revealed on Tarkov TV that 70% of players at the moment in PvE are playing solo, and that is a lot of people burning up server capacity that BSG ultimately has to pay for. So if they move this to a local PvE infrastructure instead, you will be running it on your machine using your processing power that BSG doesn't have to pay for. So given they have this direct financial incentive, I think that they'll put it through. As I said, this will be for solo only, and there won't be any co-op play on local machines with peer-to-peer or anything like that, as you will still have to play on the BSG servers if you're playing with at least one other real person. But as we said, most are playing solo, which means that this will free up the other servers for those few that aren't. Alongside this, there are a bunch of other improvements coming to PvE. AI improvements, which are probably necessary, season selection and difficulty selection, and the ability to purchase PvE as a standalone item, basically if you have an account other than EOD or Unheard. I don't know whether this will be possible if you don't own Tarkov at all, I imagine not, and they are adding the ability to wipe your character if you want to, because PvE PMCs don't wipe with the regular game. This makes PvE useful for looking at endgame content at the start of a new wipe. You can get a sneak preview of what's going on with the PvP side this way. Given the lack of wipes, they are intending to slow the speed of progression down a bit in PvE as well. Number 7 is map-to-map travel, and although I'm a little nervous about this feature, I'm excited to see what BSG can bring to the table. We got a little bit more information in Tarkov TV about how this might function, at least in the early days. Nikita said that there would be a new event with location-to-location traveling, or marathon, and the idea is that you travel to a list of locations in a certain pattern, and once the event is finished, the mechanic will remain in the game. To me, this sounds very much like map-to-map travel coming alongside the regular game how we play it now, at least at first, so it won't be necessary to trudge all the way across the map from one side to another to play a map that you want to go to or to meet your teammates. If there is an extra incentive to use the mechanic or special bonuses that continue once the quest is finished, then it could be fun to do map-to-map travel when you want a longer play session and just play a quick raid on any map when you don't. Number 8 is KillCams. My understanding was that BSG weren't going to add KillCams, and they said to Nice Guy when he asked them specifically for an update a while back that it was too hard and they weren't going to do it. However, on this Tarkov TV, Nikita said they had come to some conclusion on how to make it work, and there will be the option to see the kill cam of the person who killed you so that you can either report them or whatever. I personally think that most people are more interested in just seeing where they died from as opposed to necessarily reporting cheaters, although that's obviously a nice thing to have. We should bear in mind that there will be desync with BSG servers on the kill cam, whatever form it takes, and as we have seen in the arena version, not everything looks exactly as it would do from the other person's screen, so you have to take it with a bit of a pinch of salt. But this one is a big change from what I thought BSG had said previously, and it would be very cool to get that view after the raid to figure out where you died from. It will definitely help with the learning experience, and new players will benefit in particular very much. Now, there are two elements that I don't really like in this update. The first one with the potential of forcing scavs to play on any map, so you won't be able to pick them anymore as a scav unless you have max fence rep, and then you might be able to choose the location. I don't actually have a problem with this in principle, but the main reason why I don't like it is, for example, if your PC won't run Streets and you don't get a choice to veto, then as soon as you see it loading into Streets, you'll just have to quit the game and try again later. I think that some kind of exclusion would be necessary, so say you get rid of Lighthouse and Streets if you have a lower end PC, which means that you can only play the maps that you're actually able to run on your machine. The second part, which is pretty controversial, is the idea of mines, tripwires, traps, and mortar events. This all sounds extremely toxic, and every time we've had something like this added to the game, such as the KS-23 with flashbang shells or the grenade launcher, it's basically needed to be nerfed into non-existence or hidden behind layers of quests and or crafts to make it very scarce and expensive. Apparently, you will be able to booby trap bodies and containers as well, but it will come with the ability to defuse too, and some demining, so maybe it will be okay depending on how it's done. If we get the ability to remove the claymores on Lighthouse, for example, or defuse mines in certain areas of the map elsewhere, then perhaps the system could be good overall. The especially interesting part of this is how it's related to PMC Karma, because the new boss Partisan will hunt down players with low karma, and he is the boss who will own this mechanic around mines and tripwires. We don't really know that much about PMC Karma at the moment, other than that you will lose it for sitting in bushes too long, but I'm sure there'll be lots of other things outside of that that cause you to either gain or lose PMC Karma. We'll have to see when it comes. Overall, I'm looking forward to the next wipe at the beginning of August, as we'll get lots of cool stuff, and until then, we've just got to let BSG cook and last out the next 2 months of this patch to see what the future brings. As usual, big shout out to all my patrons, and as always, have fun in your raids.